What you saying, people? Is another episode of The Social Worker and the Mentor. Guys, I keep saying to you, thank you so much for liking and subscribing. There's so much that me and Rob, we haven't done. But just to say, we really appreciate, we see the comments, we see the feedback. And also, as I said before, look, our Patreon is up. So if you go onto our Instagram, our Patreon link is there, so you like and subscribe. There's an episode of myself and Rob, episode of myself and the chief social worker, and also recently there's an episode called Excluded, which should be up very, very shortly. So yeah, a lot of work that I was doing out in the community with young people. So yeah, listen, just keep liking and subscribing. If you do want to be a guest on the podcast, make sure you email thesocialworkerandmentor@gmail.com. Right. So people, listen, just to say, do you know what? I'm really, really excited with the guest opposite me, because the guest literally opposite me taught me at university. Yeah. So literally you're looking at like 11 years ago, well before I became a social worker. So I'm really, really honored to have this guest next to me. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, Nana. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. And do you know what? To listen to you, I'm sitting next to you on these chairs here, and I'm seeing you say the stuff that I've seen you see on my TV screen at home. It's just beyond exciting to see it close up. So thank you for having me. I'm Tanya Moore. I'm Principal Social Worker in Adult Care Services in Essex County Council. And I've been a social worker for, 39 years.
Wow.
Coming up to my 40th year in social work. Yeah.
Let's clap. I want to clap for my old lecturer, honestly, because guys, listen, do you know what? Whenever I talk about university, you've probably seen me say it so many times, but I've always mentioned my lecturer, Tanya, because that preparation for practice module, I always remember it. I always remember you doing this.
Oh,
do you remember when you used to do that? You used to do that when we was talking too much in class. You used to go and do this. But it's so good to have you, Tanya, to come onto the podcast. But I do want to ask you, preparation for practice, because as a former lecturer, when I've gone around to universities, the common theme from students is that the curriculum is not preparing them for practice. I still have your lecture slides. I still refer to it a lot where I need to. But does the curriculum, do you think, now that you're not lecturing anymore, would you say it prepares students for practice?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I don't know that any social work training course can prepare any of us to go out into practice. I don't know that any of us can be, totally prepped and ready to go from the day that we graduate. What I think good social work training can do is help us learn to become social workers and to see the world through a social work lens. So what I think is that social workers see the world through a psycho-social, politico-relational lens. We understand that there are lots of things that drive us and make us behave in the way that we do, and many of them are out of our control. So there are social forces, there are political forces, and social workers understand this, we see this. So whenever we work with people, we might be completing a task that's particular to the team. We might be completing a task that looks like something any other professional can do. But we're doing it coming from the understanding that for all of us, there are internal forces, there are external forces that are driving us, and that actually these forces aren't equally distributed. We have a really strong sense of social justice and of understanding that, put simply, the world isn't a fair place, and some people have a lot more to get through in order to get to the same place. And social workers understand this, and good social work training helps us to develop this understanding, develop this insight. And I think also a sense that a really good way to address some of the social injustices that so many people face is to get alongside people, to work within a relationship, to get close to people, to understand with them what matters to them, what's important to them, and help them think through how it is that they're going to get to where they need to be. To me, this is pure social work, and it's this that good social work training can help us to do. So I don't think a social work training course can help us to learn how to do a specific assessment for a specific team or how to complete a particular review form for a certain service.
Yeah.
But what it can do is help us know that whatever task we're going to learn how to do, we're coming at it from the perspective of a social worker.
And you know what? I think you're right though, and I think probably I've had a lot of frustration with it, but I think you're correct. I think maybe I've had to learn that, you know, no course can prepare you. But would you say, Tanya, actually that there probably needs to be changes in maybe like some of like the modules? Or do you think even if you change some of the modules, like I remember doing like values and diversity in year one, I remember doing social policy, I remember doing the law module. Would you say the modules need to change, or does it need to stick?
You know, the world's moving, so the modules need to move too.
Yeah.
We need to keep moving with it.
Yeah,
we need to be
that's it.
closely connected to what's going on in the world outside, and
Yeah.
we need to be agile and shift along with it. Absolutely. So we need new people in universities. We need people drawing on services, care experienced young people, talking about what needs to happen in the modules, in the classrooms.
Yeah.
And we need social workers in practice coming into the universities teaching us, and we need every opportunity possible for students to get out of the university and into practice to see what's going on in the world outside.
Yeah, because I think, Tanya, that what I'm finding with practice is that it's starting to flatline, because families are really, really saying to us that actually they just feel the gap between social workers and them is massive. I mean, I was having this conversation with the chief social worker, and I was even saying to her that the problem that I have, the government data is saying this. It's not like that. It really, really isn't. The experiences of what families and children and young people are saying, it's not what the government data is actually showing us in terms of practice. I think the government data to, you know, and I'm just going to say it because it's my podcast, I can say it. The government data is not reflective of what's happening. I think a lot of it is it's showing too much good. It's actually not showing the key issues, the key indicators in terms of the impact on what's happening with the profession, with the degree, and also for our families. And I just think for me, that's where my biggest frustration is. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to be having more social workers coming in, more families with experience to come in, because is that what you used to say in our preparatory practice module, relationship-based practice? That is so central and so key to what we're doing. So I do agree with you. I think that's what we need to do. I think the curriculum is becoming a bit outdated. It needs to change. In your role as the principal social worker, how would you define your role being a principal social worker? Because in other local authorities, it's to do with like learning and development. Is that the same for you where you're at?
It is, but can I just come back to something you've just said? Am I allowed to do that
Of
on your
course you
podcast?
can.
Can I do that?
Of course.
So just something about the data not telling the whole story or the true story.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to kind of pause with that for a minute, because data can only give one bit of insight onto a full picture. So there are so many other truths in that story that need to be told. Data is a snapshot. Data looks at a room from one end, you know, from one doorway, from one window. It doesn't tell the whole story. And this is where research and really good social work research is so important to us. And hearing narratives, hearing stories from people who are drawing on services, experiencing services, as well as people who work in them. All of those other stories are part of the truth of what's going on out there. It's not enough to just look at data. And perhaps that kind of segues on to what my role as principal social worker does as well, because a principal social worker, and certainly the fantastic role that I'm really lucky to hold at the moment, yes, it's a lot about learning and development, but my principal social worker role sits on the adult leadership team board. So I sit with the directors of the service, and it's my role to make sure those other stories continue to be heard there. So the directors must look at the data. They have to look at the data. They have to look at the numbers. They have to think about how the service is being directed and shifted and moved and planned. And it's my role to make sure that none of those decisions are made without a fuller picture of what's the impact on the people who are being supported, what's the impact on the people who are working in the service. So the PSW role for me is about giving a much fuller and more detailed picture of what's going on in our world.
And so with the role also, are you linked closely with the ASYE Academy for adults as well?
So my two favourite days in the year of my current role are when I get to spend a whole day with the newly qualified social workers, each tranche of newly qualified social workers. And we have a fabulous day. We talk about relationships, we talk about risks, and we talk about rights-based practice, which is core to everything that we do in adult social care. And we have a hoot. We start off, some of the conversations you'd probably remember from preparation for practice.
Yeah.
We talk about risks and what risk means to each of us in our lives, and then we try and think about what this means to us as professionals, supporting people who are managing the risks that are going on in their lives, not going in and trying to eradicate risk, because a well-lived life involves some risk. Thinking about how at different times in our lives risk means different things to us, thinking about different approaches to risk that each of us will have anyway. So we start off by thinking about something that's very personal to each of us, but then thinking about what this means for our practice and what this tells us about how we can continue to learn and develop in our practice. I'm smiling because I'm remembering some of the conversations that we had in Prep for Practice. So social work is so much about beginning with who we are and understanding us, and then, extrapolating that out, thinking, what does this mean? What does this tell me? The way that I'm responding to the person who's in front of me, what does this tell me about what might be happening for them? So we begin by understanding ourselves and our own responses, and then we think, what can we learn from that? What does that tell us about what's happening for this person? So the day spent with the newly qualified social workers is an absolute joy, because it really is getting back to basics. It's talking about relationship-based practice.
And I remember, Tanya, in that lecture and that module, I remember you always used to say that authenticity in social work is very, 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 very important. And actually, families that we work with, they always do kind of appreciate that they appreciate the fact that social workers are not detached. And I remember you used to talk about, what's that theory? Egan, look at that, even an Egan solar theory of communication. Like, doesn't say
goodness, it's a model, isn't it?
But all these things that I've still got it in my head, because I still remember it, because I still remember the value of the module that you led on. I don't need to go into my lecture slides to go and have a look at it, but I'm just saying, but I've still got it up here that, I remember this. And I think the way in which you did the module for us back then, and guys, you're talking about literally 2011, 2010. Yeah, you're talking, that's how long ago it is. But I still remember the way in which you made it so applicable. And I think is when I got into practice as a social worker, I was like, okay, this is what Tanya's talking about in her module. It started to kind of click a bit more. Do you know what I mean? So honestly, the way in which you lectured was amazing. I have to always say, I have to thank you so much for that. And I'm so glad we kept in contact. Do you miss lecturing though?
Oh, I do. Yeah. I do. I do.
We should go back.
I suppose it's just a privilege, isn't it? I mean, all that you've just said, obviously it thrills me so much. Thank you so much for saying that. It's, teaching and social work for me. So I'm a teacher and a social worker.
Yeah.
I worked for a number of years in higher education. I'm back in practice now. I'll always be a practitioner at heart, I think. But the two are very similar in that you're allowed an opportunity to get to know people, to get to understand what's important to them, and help them think through what it is that they want to do and where they want to be. What greater reason to get out of bed in the morning? It's a fantastic thing. So a good PSW role, principal social worker role, allows you some of that as well. And certainly my current role allows me to do a bit of teaching too, or creating a space in which people can learn. I suppose the idea of teaching, it sort of suggests that I have a pile of information that I can impart and it'll, stick in people's heads. There's a little bit of that when you first come onto a social work training course, less so when we're talking about continuing professional development, because obviously as a social worker, I continue to learn. I'm learning right now, having this conversation with you. There's always so much to learn. But there's something about creating a space where we all feel safe to open ourselves up to some new thinking and new understanding. And it's a huge privilege to be allowed to do that still.
I do want to ask you something. So in your role, because it's adults, what are the pressures in adult social care? Because I think one thing about the podcast is that I think everyone's going to say, Nana, you're so focused on children, I have to look at adults. What are the pressures that adult social workers from your end are dealing with?
Gosh, oh my goodness, there's there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much. You know, a massive pressure for adult social care is the same as children's social care, in that there's so much to do. There's so
Mm,
much to do, and there are never enough people to do it in the way that we want to do it. I suppose our big challenge is to make sure that we don't focus so much on how busy we are, and we're always very, very busy, that we don't stop to do it properly and to listen to the people whose lives are most impacted by all that we do, and create space for the people drawing on services to drive the service, to listen, to work in co-production with people, to make sure that everything we do is at its roots totally driven, designed wherever possible by people who it's most going to impact. There's something about any decisions that are taken should be as close as possible to the person who's going to be impacted by them. And when you're busy, when the numbers feel so overwhelming sometimes, it's very difficult to stop and pause and do that. And that's absolutely a challenge for all of us, I think, in adult social care.
And also, just to say, I think most people, public may not know, but adult social care, they also have their own chief social worker as well. So for children, we have Isabel Trowler, and then for adults is Sarah McClinton. So just so you guys can be aware that there's a chief social worker for adults and for children. So Sarah, if you're watching, you need to come onto the podcast. Definitely. Like, I'm going to message you. You need to come on the podcast. And finally, Tanya, just to say, you've got a book, you know.
Oh, we have a book. Yes,
Yeah.
we have a book.
Talk about your book. You need to plug your book.
Okay, so I know that you're going to be inviting me back on with
Yes,
Nagas to talk
yes.
about the book. So it's not my book, to be very clear. The book has been co-edited with two brilliant women, Namal Jude and Gloria Samango.
I know Namal, yeah.
And the book is created by all of the storytellers who have written for the book. And it's a book about anti-racist practice. And the book is a really important book to me. Some years ago, I was lucky enough to be involved in the creation of a book on anti-racist social work, which was about all of us thinking what action we could take to overcome racism, to combat racism, to undermine racism. It's a really important book, and it was very much of its time. It spoke a narrative that needed to be said then. But in the years afterwards, a lot of people said to me, oh, I'm reading that book. I'm reading that book because I want to see how to practice in an anti-racist way. And I'm not sure that was the story of the book. So we needed to do a follow-up book to the first book to say, you want to be anti-racist? That's brilliant. We're all of us thinking about what we can do in our own lives to be anti-racist, to actively undermine racism. But in practice, what does this look like? And I'm so proud that that's what this book does. So we have an amazing collection of authors, all of whom telling their own stories in an accessible way, in a really clear way. And each chapter finishes with really clear direction on what we can do as practitioners to overcome racism in social work.
Fantastic, fantastic. So people, yeah, this book, we're going to talk about it in the next episode. So just tune into the next episode when we talk about the book. But do you know what? Just to say, I'm so proud I've had my old lecturer on, honestly. And I have to say, Tanya, you know, you were very influential in terms of my career and going into social work. Like I said, that module for me was so key. I think how you did it, the linking the theory to practice, all of it really makes sense. And I'm just literally so proud I've had you on after. How long has it been? How long has it been now?
10, 11 years.
10, 11 years, and that we're still in contact. So no, just thank you so much. Just before you go, where can people find you?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's my. I'm on Blue Sky. I don't know that many people are on there yet.
What's Blue Sky?
Blue Sky. It sort of came along to take over from Twitter when Twitter went badly awry.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that many are on there yet, but I'm there if anyone's lurking around and can find me. LinkedIn is probably the place to find me. Yeah.
So people, listen, Dr. Tanya Moore. If you want to speak to my old lecturer, very experienced, very seasoned, Dr. Tanya. But Tanya, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. Obviously, we've got another episode coming up very soon, but I just think this is a reunion worth waiting for, and what better way to do it than on a podcast. But Tanya, thank you so much. Thank you. So people, listen, you know where to find us. You like, subscribe and share. keep supporting. And also, big up to Robert as well, my brother Robert. Big up to Rob. You know, he's doing what he needs to be doing as well. But yeah, like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you soon.